Hello and welcome to Season 4, Episode 5 of Logicast, the AWS News podcast brought to you by Logicata. And I should also point out that today is our 100th episode, which might not be obvious from the season and episode number, but this is our 100th episode of the Logicast AWS News podcast that we have recorded. So John is trying to celebrate with his Apple reactions, which don't seem to be working. He's been practicing this for about the last 10 episodes because I knew he wanted to go Apple reaction crazy when we hit the centenary. But now he's got them working. So if you're listening to this and you've got no idea what I'm talking about, check out the YouTube channel and you'll get to see John setting off fireworks, confetti, and balloons and all sorts, whatever Apple reaction he can remember the hand gesture for. So there we go. I am joined, as always, now that he's finished playing with his Apple reactions, by my colleague, lead cloud engineer, John Goodall. How are you doing today, John?
Oh, I'm beside myself with excitement. I am. I'm on cloud 9. 100 episodes. Jesus.
I think I got so excited about your Apple reactions that I forgot to introduce myself. But
completely fucked it. Yeah.
So I'm Carl Robinson, CEO and co-founder of Logicata. There we go. If this is the first time you've ever listened to an episode, in case you wondered who on earth I am, I've remembered to introduce myself now. And we're also joined today by a very special guest and AWS hero, Peter Sankauskas. How are you doing today, Peter?
I am fantastic. Thank you for having me.
Good. You've got the dubious honor of being the guest for our 100th episode.
I had no idea. Congratulations.
There we go. We saved that as a surprise for you and the listeners. So, yeah. So Peter, tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do for a living, what you do for the community, etc. I mentioned you're a hero. Tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah. So I've been in the AWS community for 15 years now. It feels like a long time. I was working for a few different startups, and I left the startup and I'm like, all right, I want to figure out how to promote what AWS, like the best practices within AWS. And so I'm going to start a consulting business. But I had no customers, no pipeline, no reputation, no anything. And so friends of mine in San Francisco Bay Area had been running the Advanced AWS meetup, and I asked them if I could help them with it. They're like, no, just take it. Like, it's too much work. And so I started running that in 2013. And then Netflix were having a competition to promote their open source systems. And what I noticed that their open source systems were quite difficult to get up and running in your own account. And so I wrote a bunch of Ansible scripts and automations to make that really easy to get up and running in your account. So did a bunch of open source as part of that. So with that, plus the user group and the videos that I was making at the time, Amazon came along and said, hey, we want to make you part of this community hero program. I'm like, all right, great. Like, I have no idea what that is, never heard of it before. There's probably 50 people that are going to be in this. And then when they did the initial announcement, it was me and 5 other people. And I'm like, whoa, you want to put me at the level of Eric Hammond? And this is amazing. And so I have been a hero from when the program started, and I'm still now running the Advanced AWS meetup. I'm joined by Natalie on that now, and our next meetup is actually next week, which is really exciting. And then a few years back at reInvent, I started talking to some friends about how do they know which services are sort of more popular and which ones are trending upwards, which ones are trending downwards. Was there any data available for something like this? And no one had any answers. They pointed to the Datadog Stata Serverless report, which is interesting, but doesn't really give you the sentiment behind the services. And what I really wanted was something more like the Stata JavaScript report. So I ended up creating a survey, and I've been running that for a while, and we can talk about that a little bit later on. So that's my sort of involvement in the AWS community.
So I'm curious. I have a quick question for you. I've spoken to some long-time heroes, and I know that heroes are now on a 2-year renewal cycle. But have you dodged that because you've been in the program for so long? Or
I just went through my. I did a renewal 2 years ago, and then did one just this last December.
Congratulations, then, for remaining in the program.
Thanks.
John and I we're up for renewal now.
I speak at enough conferences and do things in the community. That should be good.
You're not concerned. There's no
No.
kind of beads of sweat when you come to
No.
completing your renewal application.
I have this from him every year when the CB renewal comes around, because that's obviously once a year, not once every other. And because he got kicked out once, every time it comes around, it's like, ah!
Yeah, I
Mhm,
didn't get
mhm.
renewed after my first year as a community builder, so I get a little bit more nervous. I have since been
100
renewed.
episodes. It's
So,
got to count for something.
well, one would hope so, but obviously I can't just put multiple podcast episodes in. I've got to have a bit of variety as well. So the podcast itself is a piece of content, I guess. So,
Mhm,
and I
mhm.
think it's quality over quantity, but hopefully we've got a little bit of both. So.
Absolutely.
Anyway, thanks for giving us that excellent overview of your career in the Hero program, Peter. But we're not here to talk about AWS community. We're here to talk with the AWS community about what's going on in the world of AWS news. So once a week, I curate a list of AWS news, which I share via my weekly AWS News Roundup newsletter. Then John and I pick a selection of the articles from the newsletter that we'd like to talk about with our guests. So we do, of course, have such a selection of articles to talk about with John and Peter today. And the first of those is the announcement that Amazon, don't get that wrong, it's Amazon S3 Metadata is now generally available. So I think S3 Metadata was one of the announcements at reInvent back in December last year in the keynote, if I recall. But it was announced into preview. It's now gone into general availability as of the date of this announcement, which was the 27th of January last week. So, John, I think both of you are pretty excited about this, but let's go to John first. Thoughts on this one, John?
I mean, excited is probably the wrong word, because I have hobbies and things, but
Well, you were excited about episode 100, so there was definitely some excitement there. So, it's all relative, isn't it?
I mean, yeah. So S3 metadata is a funny old thing, because since I've been using S3, been able to manually put metadata on objects in S3, and I've done that before, and it's kind of really handy. Previous thing I was working on was part of a team that was building photo sharing app, and it did use generative content, and users would upload photos to the app, and we'd grab a load of metadata off the photos, and then we'd have to stitch it into the request to put it into the bucket so we can then read it off of the object again. But that's been a thing for a while. What this is doing is it's just kind of giving you automated metadata, which is good. We like that, because up until this was kind of a thing, you just put an object in a bucket and, can you tell me anything else about it? No, not really. It's just sort of the okay,
Here's the size.
helpful. Here's the size and an E tag, which means nothing. Brilliant.
Mhm.
And that's quite cool. And it's being driven by their new type of S3 bucket as well. So a tables bucket, which is, I think they call it dog fooding, kind of, eating your own product, if you like, which is nice that they're doing that, and they've not gone, here's a new really cool S3 feature. We're not going to tell you how we're building it. Cool.
Mhm.
But yeah, this is useful if you do a lot in S3, if you're putting things in and out and you need to find out more about it. And I can see it cutting a lot of like scratch tables and DynamoDB usage kind of out, where you don't have to put a thing in a bucket and then go, oh, I can't actually attach that as metadata, so I'm going to put it in a table and then refer to it. And it cuts out a lot of that, again, what AWS like to call undifferentiated heavy lifting. So I can see that kind of design pattern going away, which is good. What's less good is it's only available in 3 regions, and they're all in America. Generally available, my arse.
Well, Peter, you're in America, so I guess that's why you're a little bit more excited about this, because you might actually get a chance to use it.
Yeah, exactly. And the pricing page, like you're right, like it's only in 3 regions so far, but the pricing for this service is quite interesting. So you're charging 45 cents per million updates. And you think, all right, great, like that's the charge. Well, that's on top of S3 table storage at 2.5 cents per 100 objects. But they don't just charge you for the number of objects, they also charge you for the storage. And so it's 2.65 cents per gigabyte. And then to query it, you're paying half a cent for 1,000 requests. But then you also have to pay maintenance on these S3 tables, which is basically just data compaction. And that's 0.4 cents per 1,000 objects and 5 cents per gigabyte. So you're getting like 7, I think, line items if you're using this for storage. Good luck calculating that bill.
It's going to catch some people out, do you think?
I mean, they're little numbers, but if you've got, 1 billion objects, it'll start to add up.
Interesting.
It smells like it's going to be in the territory of a rounding error on your S3 storage bill, if we're honest. But it's a bit naughty because here's this lovely new feature. We're not going to make it easy to work out how much it costs.
Right.
Interesting. Well, another one for the cloud economists amongst us then to add into thoughts around cost optimization.
Yeah, I can do sarcasm, unlike Corey, because I'm British.
Oh dear, that's he doesn't claim to do sarcasm. He claims to do snark. So yeah, I'm not sure the difference between sarcasm and snark is, but there we go. Anyway, on that note, let's move along to our second article for this week, and it's another feature announcement. And I've noticed actually there's been quite a few feature announcements for Elastic Beanstalk recently, and I'd often thought of Beanstalk as a bit of a legacy product that doesn't seem to have had a lot of love in recent years. But all of a sudden, the Beanstalk announcements have started popping up. So this one is, as I said, a new feature announcement. AWS Elastic Beanstalk adds default support of EC2 Launch Template when creating new environments. Now, I don't have off the top of my head what the other feature announcements were. You guys may or may not remember them, but let's talk specifically about this one first of all. This addition of EC2 Launch Template when creating new environments. So I'll come to you first on this one, Peter. What are your thoughts around this? And do you agree with me that perhaps Beanstalk has not had a lot of love over recent years?
Yeah, I am surprised by that. They've also recently updated the runtimes for PHP and Python and a bunch of other services as well. So it is getting love. This service has been dead to me since ECS came out. So it's not something that I use, and it's certainly not something that I would recommend people use, but it's amazing that it is getting love. We'll talk about the survey a little bit later on, but it's the second lowest on retention and interest in the containers group. And so the community itself is also not particularly interested in it. I'd expect its usage to drop next cycle.
The community is a funny data pool, though, because that biases towards more technical and more experienced folks. And Beanstalk, I've always seen it as a starter service. So when I was kind of first getting into cloud, and my first employer that was doing it was kind of getting into it, it was, well, do we do this with Beanstalk? Because it will kind of do most of it for us. Or do we do the learning, do the hard work, and go through, write a load of Ansible, write a load of Packer, write a load of Terraform, and kind of do that kind of the hard way. And we ended up doing a bit of both because we needed to get something going. But the view was, well, there isn't a great runway off of this service. Yes, you can extend it with CloudFormation, but you're kind of stuck to an extent.
Yeah, exactly.
There's not a great runway to expand. So it was, well, it's good to get going, but once we've kind of got people trained up and they understand the architecture and the landscape and all the rest of it, then we just need to start migrating back out of it again. And that, I think, is part of why the community isn't a fan, because it's one of those services that once you know that there's a better way to do it, you do the better thing. I did find it quite interesting, and I suppose it's testament to how much of an unloved service this has been of late, is that this took this long. Launch configurations as part of scaling groups have been deprecated for 2 years, I want to say. Something in that magnitude, like a while. So, yeah, this took ages for them to actually pull their fingers out.
I wonder if it's getting love or if it's other teams within AWS are like, we don't want to support this anymore. You need to upgrade.
Well, I've got a theory that there's one very large financial institution somewhere that's driving all of these. Like, why have they done that? Because they asked for it.
They insisted. Yeah. And they had a large share of the voting rights.
$1 million a month. Yeah, they spend $1 million or $2 million a month, and they asked for it. Okay.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, let's see. Let's see if the Beanstalk announcements keep on coming, or if this was just a little isolated flurry of Beanstalk announcements. on that note, let's move along to our next article. And of course, we're back on the subject of AI. You can't have an AWS News podcast at the moment without talking about AI. This is an article from the AWS News blog about the fact that DeepSeek R1 models are now available on AWS. So interesting timing from AWS on this, because DeepSeek was getting a massive amount of press last week, I think it was, perhaps last week and the week before, about how their new models are so super efficient that they're going to completely shake up the AI industry and the GPU industry, etc. That their models run so much more efficiently than the other kind of big names in the LLM space. And then very quickly, AWS announced that DeepSeek R1 models are now available via Bedrock on AWS. So, John, thoughts on this?
This was 100% a reactionary move. This was, there's a new model, quick, run it. But it's an interesting one because DeepSeek, much more than I think a lot of the other models that you could previously find on Bedrock, is much more of a direct competitor to OpenAI and their GPT model. And obviously you can't run OpenAI on Bedrock because it's owned by Microsoft. Let's be honest here. We don't want to run Microsoft's things if we can help it. So this is a reactionary move, but a good one, because here's now a direct competitor that runs faster and cheaper. I haven't looked at the pricing, but that runs faster and probably cheaper because it uses less resource, and it's a much more direct competitor to ChatGPT. Go for your life. So this was reactionary, but I think necessary, because AWS was absolutely late to the party with all the rest of the LLM stuff. And yes, okay, they've been in the AWS, they've been in the AI and ML space for ever and a day, but it's always been with the less sexy services. It's with, it's recognition and SageMaker and Transcribe and all these sorts of things that people don't go, oh, that's really cool. But you still need all those things. But whatever. Like I say, this was reactionary, but necessary. Interesting to see where it's going, though, because I think it's only one of the DeepSeek models, and there's like 3 or 4 of them. So I guess we'll see.
Yeah, and
Peter?
the pricing for this is not per token like it is for some of the other models within Bedrock. This one is more like a marketplace app. So you know how you get that running on an EC2 instance and you're just paying for the infrastructure costs. It's a very similar model to that. So you get it up and running in your account, and then you can make as many queries to it as you want. So if you're able to do things in bulk, like fantastic, and then spin it down, you're saving money that way, rather than paying per token. But it is something that you need to get up and running in your own account or in your SageMaker, or do it as a Bedrock custom import model.
So not quite as simple as the other models that are available through Bedrock.
Depending on which model you're trying to use, but yes. And I think Bedrock is meant to be the umbrella service. Like, no matter what you want to do within AI, they have something that will help you do that. And so I think this is another example of that.
Yes and no, though, right? Because I said this in the blog post that I hope gets me my renewal, is that if you look at the way that Bedrock I always kind of viewed it was, here's a service, it has an API, and we'll handle all of the weird, nasty translations. And you just say, here's my prompt, or here's how I want to do my prompting, model, go. And then I looked at the differences between Claude 2 and then Claude 3.5. The interface changed. Okay, fine, I'll recode everything. But I thought the point of this service was you were going to handle that.
I have the same thing about Terraform. Like, everyone's like, oh, just use Terraform and you can move your code from AWS to Google or Azure. No, you can't. It's the same language. That's it.
Terraform, that was never the point. If you actually listen to what Mitchell Hashimoto said, it was so that you have tool familiarity.
Yes.
You know how to write Terraform, but you're writing different Terraform.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
And so agnostic, but
yeah. I can see Bedrock, like, it would be nice to have that same API interface across everything. And I think the space is moving so fast that would be really hard to do.
Oh, yeah.
So good luck. But you do have it's not a new SDK that I need to integrate. It's not like, there's just simple changes to move between the models.
Yeah.
So did
maybe
you have
it's a
to
me
update
thing.
your you had to update your state machine, did you, to change
Oh,
models?
look at you using big words.
Ooh, state machine. Yeah. I haven't even read the blog post.
You published it.
Yeah, I published it. I did. No, you published it.
I didn't push the go button. I'm not allowed. I don't have
Who's the
permissions.
editor here?
Yeah, I just pushed the button. Yeah.
No, I had to dust off my very bad Python.
Ooh.
Mm.
Right. Well, we don't want to hear any more about that. So, on that note, let's move along to yet another birthday celebration. So, we've seen lots of AWS services celebrating big birthdays recently. We've had Lambda. We've had what else did we have? We had S3 had a big birthday, I think. But this week it's the turn of SES, Amazon Simple Email Service, which is celebrating 14 years of email sending and deliverability. So 14, not normally a birthday that one would remark upon in a blog post. So it's not like 10 or 100 or 21, but or even 15 in South America is a pretty large birthday. But here we've chosen to celebrate the 14th birthday of SES and talk about the simple email service. So, John, what's so exciting about SES turning 14?
Oh, nothing. I picked it because I don't like it, and I like to bash services occasionally.
Oh, you
You don't like the article, or you don't like SES?
So SES in and of itself is fine, but it's just kind of fine is sort of the view that I have about it. So if all you need to do is send internal notifications to people and you don't need to do any kind of clever formatting, it's just, oi, there's been a budget alert, go look. Just use SNS. It's just easier. It's just easier. Just use that. Don't think about it. If you need to send vast numbers of emails to people for mail shot campaigns, or because you're doing, big sales or whatever, and you're not Amazon, use a third-party service. The metrics that you get out of the box are easier. You don't have to talk to support and argue why you should be allowed to send emails to people. And that's a real bugbear of mine. It's to get out of the sandbox, you must raise a support ticket. These are usually processed within 1 day. And I'm reasonably good at getting out the sandbox. I've got a 95% hit rate or something. I think I've only ever been denied once. And that was just because they were processing them all in bulk and I used the same text on 2 requests, I think. But it was that's staging, that's prod. Change the wording very slightly. Deny prod. Okay, helpful. We'll go and resubmit that. And then it came through again the second time. But that's a real bugbear of mine, is that for you look at, I don't know, SendGrid or whoever, and you just sign up for an account and you can send emails. I get that Amazon really cares about spam and being good internet citizens and all this kind of thing, but I'm paying for the service, and if I get spam, you're going to block me anyway. Why do I need to ask permission to do it in the first place? That's never made sense to me, and it's a real bugbear.
Does it make sense to you, Peter?
I mean, I get the restrictions around it just because spam is so common. I went through the same thing, like when I was setting this up for my smart spreadsheet application, and I got denied the first time going through SES. I'm like, don't you know who I am?
I'm a hero.
Exactly. And so I had to do the resubmission, and they were asking about just sort of good best practices, like monitoring your bounce rate and what to do if these different things happen. I'm like, all right, fine, I'll add that. At a previous company, we started using SES to send emails out, and everything was going great. So every time someone would sign up, we'd send them a welcome email, and then we'd follow it up with other ones. Until someone said, "Here's 10 Bitcoin for creating a mass number of accounts on this service, because I think this service is going to be really interesting." And we were bot swarmed. And so we had so many emails going out, and one of them happened to be using random characters at gmail.com. So our bounce rates skyrocketed. Gmail shut us off, and then SES shut us off. Getting SES back up and running through the support when you don't have a TAM, like you're a brand new startup, you don't have a. I think that was the reason that we went to a business level support, not even enterprise, is just so that we could start talking to people at SES. And so we ended up moving off of that and onto, I think it was SendGrid there, and then eventually Mailgun as other services. And then when I was doing this spreadsheet application, I came back to SES. I'm like, how much has this changed? And it's better. I don't know about like if something goes wrong, how easy it's going to be able to talk to someone. But the virtual deliverability manager, I've got a custom domain for email click and open tracking, which is nice. Like I couldn't do that before. I'm monitoring the bounce rate. So like anytime something happens, I can automatically flag that email as not being deliverable. And so I don't send anything to that anymore. So it's come a long way from the early days, and not even early days. Like this was 2017. So what's that? Halfway through its life.
I think it would have been 6 in 2017 by my quick math.
There you go.
Arithmetic, but, yeah.
So it's what I'm using now.
Cool. So a lover and a hater.
I wouldn't say love. It's acceptable.
I wouldn't say hate. It's hate.
Yeah.
Hate implies I think about it on a regular basis. Apathy is the word.
Yeah, fair enough. A user and a non-user, then I suppose. But yeah, we have clients using it though, and
they've added something to SES for incoming mail. If you're a big corporate organization and you want to do management through that, like I don't have any use case for that, but interesting that you've got enough customers that you need to do something like that. I've always thought of SES as the outgoing side, not the incoming.
Yes, me too. I didn't realize there was an incoming element to it. So let's see when SES celebrates its 21st birthday, what the uptake of that has been like. So on that note, let's move on to our final subject for this week. So this is not an article that we shared in the newsletter, but we do have, as Peter mentioned early on in the introductions, he runs a survey called Answers for AWS, which regularly polls the community about their opinions and usage of AWS services. Yeah, Peter, tell us a bit more about Answers for AWS and some of the trends that you're spotting in the survey responses.
Yeah, I'd love to. So the survey is open right now. I open it for a month, so from January 15th to February 15th. So if you haven't taken it, please go and take it. It is only 5 minutes to go and fill it in. And what we're doing is we're measuring whether you have used a service in the past, whether you even know like that service exists. And if you have used it, would you go and use that service again? And that's it. Like that's the survey, and it's doing that across a number of different categories, whether that's infrastructure as code, CI/CD, databases, AI, ML, like all the different sort of buckets that Amazon has. And actually, not all the buckets, some of the buckets. And so I've been running this survey. This is the third year that this is open. And so the first year was cool because you get some data points. The second year is where you start to see trends and whether services are trending upwards or downwards. And so what I'm really excited about is what will happen in this next one. Now that we'll have 3 data points, we'll have trends across multiple years, and seeing which services are sticking around, which ones aren't. So one interesting one is for let's see now.
Well, I've got to ask you about Elastic Beanstalk since he
so
earlier in the
so you can have a look at Elastic Beanstalk. So in terms of usage, that is 50% usage across the people that took the survey. The retention on that though, so like would I use this again if I had a choice, is only 30%. And so the only thing that is lower than that is the OpenShift Rosa service at 14%
because why would you use that?
retention. Some people do. Like it does have like 8% of usage, so someone's using it.
It's quite interesting. Some of the data points in this is quite interesting. Just veering away from that for a minute is I do, amongst other things, I do quite a lot with CI/CD services, and I absolutely have some favorites in here. And data from last year was quite interesting because the top two, basically nothing between them, GitHub Actions and Jenkins in terms of people that have used them. But then if you look at the positive negative split, GitHub Actions is overwhelmingly everybody likes it, and Jenkins everyone hates it. It's the second most used service and no one wants to use it. And honestly, that tracks because most people that are using it are doing so against their will in some sort of corporate environment, in my experience.
Yeah, and now when that conversation comes up with whoever it is that originally chose Jenkins or is responsible for keeping that as the thing that you use, you've got a data point that you can point them to. The main reason that or one of the main reasons I started this was I had a friend that kept using Elastic Beanstalk. I'm like, no. And like I had no data to point them to of like, that there are better alternatives. Now I do.
But it has got some new features, as we've highlighted.
It has got some new features, as we've covered, yes. Every year I need to go and add new services as AWS introduces them. This has been the first year I've had to remove services when AWS no longer has them. And so under the NoSQL databases section, I added QLDB, the Quantum Ledger database, for 2024. Because it wasn't there in 2023, and now in 2025 it's already gone. So I have just like a blip in my charts for that one.
What's been the most popular service according to your survey?
The most popular service is SQS. Its positive negative split is 98%. Like if you use it, like everyone loves it. And then DynamoDB is consistently like pretty high up there.
Both of those make sense. They just work. Particularly SQS is, I need a queue. It works. I don't have to think about it. Done. And it's aggressively cheap too.
Yeah. What's interesting to look at is CDK as because that's tracked across two things, the infrastructure as code and the serverless buckets. And both of those have relatively high retention. And so it wouldn't surprise me if it jumps up a slot or two in the next round, because people that use it, they really seem to like it.
Awesome. Well, we will include a link to the survey in the show notes for anyone who's listening who may want to go and add their opinions to the survey. When does the survey close, Peter?
February 15th.
Okay, and I assume that we'll be able to see the results on the same page as you can.
Correct. Yeah. So there's a little bit of processing to do with the results, but they'll be published before February's up.
Yeah. Which AWS technologies have you used to create this survey?
It's on Lightsail, isn't it?
No, it's on S3. This is a static site on S3. The survey itself is also like it's a static site on S3, but when you hit submit, it posts to a Lambda function, which is writing to DynamoDB. It's as simple as that. Like there's nothing too complicated about it. I have wanted to set up SES so that I can send out the emails through this, but for the last 3 years, I've just been sending emails from my personal account because why not?
Have you thought about productizing it? Because if you have, I have the acronym for you, the SSS. The simple survey service. Or the SSSS, the serverless simple survey service. So
S4, it's better.
Absolutely, S4. You heard it here first.
You've got to be really careful using acronyms with S's in, haven't you? Because
I wouldn't go any lower than a TLA. Yeah.
Well, yeah, but then too many of them, you start sounding like a snake with a lisp.
Well, there we go. On that note, we have run out of time for Season 4, Episode 5, the 100th recorded episode of Logicast. So just remains for me to thank you, John, as always, for your input and your amazing use of Apple reactions. And Peter, thank you very much for joining us for this 100th episode. Real pleasure to have you on and to hear your insights and to hear all about your answers for AWS survey, which, as I said, we will link to in the show notes. If you enjoyed listening to the podcast, we are available to download from wherever you get your podcasts. We also have a YouTube channel, so please head over there, like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. That is all we have time for, but we will be back next week with another episode of the Logicast AWS News Podcast for you, the 101st episode that will be. So thanks for listening, and we will see you again next time.